John Orange, and today we're going to be talking about the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire and why it was so important for America. But first, cue the intro. The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire occurred in 1911, the midpoint of what would later in American history be considered the Progressive Era. Now, during the Progressive Era, jobs were terrible. The working conditions were awful and everywhere, but jobs were getting filled by recent immigrants from Italy and the Balkans. Side note, both of those regions, fantastic meatballs. Anyways, these immigrants would typically find jobs in factories where they faced long hours, poor working conditions, and job instability. Sessions, many would actually face sharp pay cuts. And because of this, if they were to argue against their employer actually had a huge pool to choose from to replace them in case they made them unhappy. But hey, this is supposed to be Progressive Era, right? So what were reformers doing to improve these working conditions? Ironically enough, a couple years before the actual Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, there was a large revolt of shirtwaist workers, up to about 20,000 women, who actually were fighting for 52-hour weeks, 20% increase in pay, and paid overtime. I'm going to be honest here, none of that actually sounds too great, but back then, for the workers who were coming in as immigrants, those were actually really good improvements to their jobs. And actually, within 48 hours, a bunch of the small factories actually agreed to these terms. But sadly, a lot of the bigger companies refused to accept these. The two owners of the Triangle factory, Max Blanc and Isaac Harris, were actually Russian-born Jewish immigrants. They purchased the factory in 1901, whenever the 8th and 10th floors of the APUSH building opened up for sale in New York. Blanc and Harris quickly grew to become shirtwaist kings as they grew out their company to different sites. Now, I should probably tell you what a shirtwaist are. This is a shirtwaist. It's a fashionable blouse for women that quickly became very popular in the era because it was good for working and playing, and sales exploded during the era. Anyway, the 1911 fire at the Triangle factory was not the first time that Blanc and Harris actually dealt with flames. They actually had two fires in 1902 at the Triangle factory, and other fires at other factories in 1907 and 1910. These guys really have a hot streak with fires. These other fires, though, were nowhere near as destructive as the one at Triangle in 1911, because there were 600 women working at the Triangle factory at that time, and none of the other factories actually had nearly that same amount of workers. The fire itself broke out on March 25th, 1911, about 4:45 p.m. The cause of the fire was actually someone threw a lit cigarette into a wastebasket on the 8th floor, and the fires quickly spread from the trash in the wastebasket to the machines nearby, and from there it went from machine to machine. Thankfully, the workers on the 10th floor heard about it extremely quickly and were able to escape through the roof, where they were helped by New York University students to get out of the building. Some of the women on the lower floors were actually able to get out through the elevators, but they had to double the maximum capacity to be able to even get 30 people down at one time. Other than that, women also tried to flee through the two exits of the building, but one of the exits was actually locked from the outside, so many women quickly discovered that they were trapped, but it was too late. There was no one who could help them, and along with many women up the floors, they would eventually either burn to death or attempt to jump out of the windows to the street below to escape the flames. In the end, 146 women were eventually killed in the fire. Here we actually have a clip of Harris and Blanc right after their trial regarding the fire.
Immediately after the fire, Triangle Shirtwaist owners Max Blanc and Isaac Harris declared in interviews that their building was fireproof and that it had just been approved by the Department of Buildings. Yet the call for bringing those responsible to justice and reports that the doors of the factory were locked at the time of the fire prompted the district attorney's office to seek indictment against the owners. The fire can largely be attributed to the owners and their neglect to proper safety. So do you have any clue what caused this fire?
No, not at all. Our building and workplace are completely fireproof. We have no reasoning on why this fire occurred.
Why were the doors locked?
The public was always on to us. We didn't want to adopt their basic fire and safety measures, so to keep them out, we locked them out.
Why did you guys refuse to put in sprinkler systems or other simple safety measures?
We didn't feel the need to. Also in case we need to burn down our shops in the future.
Why would you need to burn down your shops?
In order to keep the fire insurance money, more money in our pockets!
Did the two small fires in 1907 in your factories happen to collect insurance money?
Yeah, those fires happened. The fires also resulted in a whole lot of money in our pockets. So I have to say, the answer is yes.
How did you two deal with the protest of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union when they led a strike in 1909?
We didn't. We resisted that. We hired police as thugs to imprison the striking women.
And we also paid off the politicians to look the other way.
Following the fire and trial, Max Blanc and Isaac Harris were not charged with anything. But on August 20th, 1913, 2 years later, Harris and Blanc are found guilty of locking their doors of their new factory with a chain during working hours with 150 women still inside the building.
After the fire, New York state legislators established the Factory Investigating Committee, which actually went out and would investigate these factories for proper working conditions. Because of this investigations, 8 new state laws were enacted to improve fire safety in these factories. These new laws were supported by many protests from external sources, from both workers and normal civilians who actually watched the fire happen. The ILGWU actually formed a funeral parade for those who died in the fire. Over 120,000 people actually showed up to this parade, and it lasted for more than 4 hours. These were not the only results to come from the fire, however. There were many more reforms and many other funeral parades and processions that were involved afterwards, but these were probably the most important things to happen. The fact that they actually instigated new fire safety techniques proved that these causing of fires and the purposefully lighting of these factories would eventually stop.